Welcome, everyone. We're so grateful to have this special edition. We've had so many people asking about neurodivergence and sex addiction and how do how do you navigate this? Is there any hope? And we have Candice Christiansen, who is the expert in our opinion, and I think in many people's opinion on these co-occurring issues. She has trained the staff at the Seeking Integrity residential program. And when we have clients that are on this spectrum, that needs some extra help, she consults with those clients as well. We want to do the best we can for clients, but there's many people that are going, I just don't even know what to do. So Candice has prepared and graciously joined us today, but prepared a presentation to talk about this. But your questions, on this topic, for Candice are welcome. Type them in at the bottom of the screen. For those of you watching the video afterwards, hopefully you're catching all of this information. And who knows, maybe Candice will come back and do a part two. So without further ado, Candice, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tammy, and thanks Seeking Integrity for inviting me. And hi, everybody. I can't see you, and I'll do my best to navigate the chat. I'm Candice Christiansen, as Tammy said, and what I'll do today is I'm going to present. I'm going to go through some slides, and then I'll pause, take a drink. I'll encourage all of us to do the same, and then I'll check the chat for questions.
The chat is disabled.
Okay, till the very end.
So I will help you with the questions and answers. So don't even worry about that.
Okay.
I was fretting earlier. I want you to not fret too. So this is that you can look at the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, but we will address those. I typically wait and address those after the presentation. So I'm going to let you just do your presentation, and then we'll navigate the Q&A, which again, you can pull up by clicking on the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. So
wonderful. Thank you, Tammy. This is my 5th presentation this year. So I've been a busy bee, and everyone does a little differently. So I really, really appreciate that. So I'm going to talk today about supporting autistic individuals' neuroculture in sexual recovery. And let's just go ahead and get started. A little bit about me. I thought I would do a visual aid because I am autistic, ADHD, diagnosed at 44. I'm 51 now, and I've been a licensed therapist for 20 years, and I've done a lot. My platform is working with autistic, ADHD, and similar neurotype individuals and couples who are in sexual recovery, but also have a variety of intimacy and communication issues. These are some of the things that I've done. And if you want to learn more about me, you can go to my websites. I have 2, CandiceChristiansen.com and namasteadvice.com. So a big thing that we do is 5-day individual or couples intensives that are neuro-affirmative, very specific to support autistic, ADHD, or similar individuals and couples in healing at a very kind of fast-paced, accelerated level. So that's a little bit about me. I want to start out, whenever I'm presenting, I like to explain how I view autism. And this really helped me in understanding myself, and it's really helped others in understanding themselves who are autistic individuals. Autism is a neuroculture. So for instance, the way an autistic person views, perceives, understands, behaves in the world is going to be different from a non-autistic person. This isn't a deficiency. It's not a bad thing. It's just a difference. So I explain it in the way that I've been with my BIPOC partner, Chris. So he's Native American and Japanese. So I'm in an interrelational relationship, or intercultural relationship rather. And what I want to say about that, similar to neuroculture, is that the way that Chris sees, perceives, functions in the world based on being Native American Japanese is going to be a little bit different than my white culture, for instance. So it's the same thing. My brain, my neurotype, is a little bit different from his brain and neurotype, and that's okay. So I'm going to explain autism through that lens today. Now, I made a list, and I'm going to invite you to take pictures of my slides. Feel free, as long as there's no interruption, which it won't. I can't see you. You can see me, but I can't see you. So, but I want you to take pictures so that you have this as a guide. when you think about autism, I'm going to throw some things out there, and I'm going to read these to you. So being autistic makes those of us who are autistic inherently vulnerable in the world. And this is because the world is unscripted. There's a lot going on that is out of our control. There's a lot of things that are happening around us that we are struggling to navigate, a lot of nuanced communication that can create a lot of anxiety, more so than we already have. And that vulnerability that we have can feel really scary to our systems. It also can feel really lonely at times, even when we're around people, because again, we're looking at the world, understanding this nuanced communication and way people are operating and talking and being. We're trying to figure it out when it's different. It's like I've been handed a deck of Uno cards, for those of you that are older, unless you still understand what Uno is. I've been handed a deck of Uno cards as an autistic person, and everyone else has been handed a regular deck of cards, and I'm supposed to be playing the card game that everyone that's not autistic plays. So it can be very lonely, it can be very confusing. And we often speak our own neuro language. My first language as an autistic person isn't verbal. Like, I don't like to speak a lot. And what's funny is I'm a therapist and a really good one. But at the end of the day, I'd rather write, text, and not talk. It's very overwhelming to my system. And so another thing I do, which you see, is I'm trying to look at the camera because I know there's a recording happening. But if you were all looking directly at me, I'd be looking around to regulate my autonomic nervous system. And that's because I'm feeling a little bit anxious, even though I present on this all the time. As an autistic person, we do carry a lot of anxiety in our body. And so what happens is we do what we can to create a sense of control or scripts in our environment. Being autistic means feeling misunderstood. And because dating and intimate relationships are unscripted, we feel like they're risky. And so we will often prefer transactional relationships instead. And so when we talk about sexual behavior, acting out, problematic sexual behavior, we're going to talk about that. And lastly, and I'll talk about this on a slide later on, but scripts, plans, routines, schedules, and structure help us so much. They truly do. They help us so much to function in a world that is so unscripted. I'm just going to pause and take a drink. That was a lot. So the key players when I look at autism as a neuroculture that folks who are autistic are dealing with are sensory responsivity, which is not talked about enough. And that really is responding to the sensory environment around us, which can be overwhelming oftentimes, and sometimes it can be underwhelming. Emotional contagion, which is feeling the energy and emotions of every single person around us. No one really talks about that either, but autistic individuals are very sensitive to the energy and emotions of others. And that can be very overwhelming because we are not sure what our emotions are oftentimes, or another person's. It gets very confusing, especially for children. So that's something to think about. Those two things can affect our communication, our ability to connect. And there are other things that affect our communication, but these are two things that are often not talked about. So I really focus on these in our program and when we're looking at sexual recovery. Here's a handout just breaking down sensory responsivity. And it looks like this. So hypersensitivity would mean a clock ticking, fluorescent or bright lights in the room, certain noises, too many people, certain smells. An unscripted environment like an airport can create a sense of complete overwhelm for an autistic person. Hyposensitive, there's a few ways I define hyposensitivity. And that's where you need more. You actually need more. So you need more, a weighted blanket, for instance. You need more light. You need a stronger smell. You need a louder noise. So you need brighter color in a room, for instance. You need more to feel sensation. So we'll talk about that on a slide when we look at sometimes what people will do to act out sexually who are autistic. Hyposensitivity can also mean if I feel regulated emotionally, I feel calm, then I can handle going into an airport. I can stay emotionally regulated because my system feels calm and grounded. Okay. So it's either I need more of something or I feel grounded so I can tolerate something that's too intense. And lastly, if we're hypersensitive for too long and we're in a state of fight or flight, our systems will go into shutdown, which becomes hyposensitive. And what can happen with either is we will sensory seek in an attempt to soothe our overwhelm or underwhelm. And here is a list on the screen of all the ways we do that. And if you think of substance abuse, or you think of sex or porn addiction, or other problematic behavior, gaming, gambling, things like that, we sensory seek to soothe. Now, there's healthy ways to do that. I exercise to soothe. You know, I love lifting weights to soothe. So I'll seek that sensory sensation. But today, because we're talking about sexual recovery, we're going to add that in. So an example of emotional contagion would look like this, or picking up the energy of someone else. You know, a non-autistic person is complaining, oh, everyone's driving me crazy. I'm so frustrated. I'm so upset. And they're telling an autistic person who quietly has kind of frozen, staring at them. Their heart starts to race. Maybe they start to get sweaty palms. I'm not saying this is exactly what happens, but they're feeling the stress of the other person and personalizing it, thinking, are they upset with me? Are they mad at me? They're saying they're mad at everyone, but I can feel their physical upset and I can feel the emotional upset. So is that me that they're mad at? So that would be an example of emotional contagion, which creates a lot of confusion. It just creates a lot of confusion. And the big technical term we use for that oftentimes is alexithymia, which is I feel a lot of emotions, but I get confused about what emotion I'm actually feeling. And then that confusion of, is it the other person's or is it mine? So I'm laying kind of a landscape for you to get an idea of why someone who's autistic might act out sexually, right? Feeling the emotions and energy and upset of someone else, maybe starting in childhood, feeling the chaos in the environment, going to school, feeling the stress of that, lots of loud sensory noises at school, lots going on, okay, all that going on, right? So, and then struggling to figure out how to communicate in a world that's just very different. And I said this in the beginning about me, but we do often communicate very differently. And oftentimes it's nonverbal. But there's a lot of shame that happens because of our differences. And starting out when we're young, I have not talked to one autistic person that has not been bullied. And I'm still bullied as an adult. So I want to just offer that because we're different, we often still get bullied even into adulthood because of how we are. And so relationally, this can pose a lot of frustration and challenges. So just some ways: crying, music, singing, screaming, vocal noises, echolalia, which is that repetition of noises, right? I'll have full-on conversations in my head, and then my husband will say, we never talked about that. Another big one, okay, that leads a lot of autistic folks to cope by sexually acting out can be rejection sensitivity. And this is also one thing that impacts the way that we communicate and connect, because rejection sensitivity is a physiologically traumatic response to real or perceived rejection. And so many autistic ADHD individuals have it. In fact, in Europe, with the ADHD diagnosis, this is one trait that fits the diagnostic criteria. And so what we know in the United States is, gosh, so many of us experience this, and it can lead people to feel suicidal. It can lead people who are autistic to isolate and withdraw from the world and stay here on their screen or their phone because it feels safer than trying to connect when that is what the response is from the world. So just some signs of rejection sensitive dysphoria. And this is I took this from Simply Psychology. Perfectionism, overachieving, catastrophizing, minor setbacks, having intense emotional reactions to perceived rejection. Same with the feeling of shame, very intense, or guilt over minor criticisms. Avoiding situations where there's a potential for rejection. And if you're autistic or in a relationship with someone who's autistic, they might avoid talking to you for fear that you're going to reject them. I did that for quite some time with my partner, Chris, until we had a discussion about what it meant when he said, "Hey, I'd love for us to have a conversation." And I would walk in thinking it was World War III, ready for a debate because I thought he was going to reject me. And he said, "No, we're just having a conversation. You share your thoughts, I share mine." That actually really helped because I literally was walking into every situation with him like this, defensive, guarded, and ready for a fight. So rejection sensitivity is very stressful to our systems. And it leads to, it is one of the other reasons why a lot of autistic individuals, males, I'm going to talk about males, isolate and would prefer to have transactional acting out behaviors or act out solo, meaning viewing porn. Okay. So there are females who struggle with sexual acting out. And for the autistic females I've worked with that struggle with sexual acting out that's problematic, it is more relational. So it can look like, oftentimes it's a misdiagnosis of borderline because it looks like very chaotic relationships. And so I'm going to put that aside because we're going to keep going along with the males. But for males, it's really solo and transactional. Why is that? We talked a little bit about that. The biggie is freedom from rejection. There's also no commitment. There's no pressure to perform or be a certain way or act a certain way, behave a certain way to fit in. It feels safer, which is a false sense of safety emotionally, right? Especially if someone's paying for sex, I pay you, you do what I want. And there's really little risk there, even though those of us on the outside are going, oh my goodness, there's so much risk. But it can be very sensory soothing, especially if it's like an erotic massage, for instance, very, very soothing tactile wise, maybe visually soothing if it's porn. And something we're seeing so much of in the autism community is folks connecting or having relationships with bots or AI porn. It's not real, but it fills that void of loneliness and it fills that void of being rejected because the AI or the bot will literally just match itself to the person. So these are some of the reasons, and less stress. These are some of the reasons why I see and we see autistic individuals acting out in the way they do. And some of the things our clients have said, I get my needs met with a bot. I don't care that she isn't real. Relationships seem out of reach. I'm constantly getting rejected. What's the point? If I pay for sex, I get my needs met. There's no disappointment. I'm also the one in control. And no one's getting hurt by me viewing porn. What's the big deal, right? I'm in my mid-30s. I'm autistic. You know, I don't really have friends. What's the problem here? So this is just that sensory seeking behavior broken down when we look at it in terms of sexual acting out. So tactile would be the touch. And these are things that we'll see with folks. So this is a trigger alert if anyone just sees words that might be triggering. Visual would be porn, right? Or reading erotica, for instance. So seeing strip clubs. Oral, alcohol, food, vaping, substances. Olfactory would be smells. Some people have fetishes, which fetishes aren't problematic, but let's say they hire prostitutes for the fetish. Problematic. Okay, illegal, problematic. And I want to say with compassion that I've worked with a lot of autistic males who have hired prostitutes. And so for very similar reasons. So it is problematic and so many don't think about the legal the legal ramifications potentially. And then auditory as well. So what they hear also can be arousing. Okay, I'm talking really fast, everybody. We're almost done. So this will give us lots of time for questions and responses. So I want to really talk about just giving you a snapshot about what does neuro-affirmative recovery look like. So a neuro-affirmative approach is a team approach. This is why I really love SILA, or Seeking Integrity, because they're one of the programs that will say, hey, Candice, we've got an autistic individual that needs some executive function coaching. Can someone on your team, which is usually Chris, my partner, does that? Or can you consult with family and this client while we do the therapy, the group, while they're with us? Of course, right? It takes a team approach. So we're going to break that down because depending on the level of autism, level 1, 2, or 3, there are going to be support needs. And what I will say is, regardless of level 1, 2, or 3, someone in recovery, someone coming to therapy that's autistic needs a team. So I'm constantly educating therapists all over the world that it's okay that I'm working as the neuro-affirmative consultant with this person and family, that you're doing the therapist, right? If they're out of state or country, this is how it looks. And then Chris will also tag team with me, my partner, to really hone in on executive function challenges while I'm working on understanding your autism, right? Understanding how that might affect communication with mom and dad or relationship or partner. So CSAT therapist, CSAT stands for Certified Sex Addiction Therapist. If someone has problematic sexual behavior, I recommend a CSAT. The training is excellent, and we know how to treat sex addiction or problematic sex, okay? The executive function life coach is looking at time management, schedule, structure. Sponsor, as we know, is excellent for accountability. Sometimes they might need a 24/7 sober coach, and that is if they're struggling and they've got to have access to someone 24/7, that's not long-term. We always encourage group. We know that. A sexual recovery group that hopefully is neuro-affirmative to the way that they learn. And then sometimes a case manager is needed for instance, like helping with Medicaid or Social Security for some people. And that can sometimes that can look like the life coach's job or role, but I'm just giving you an example of the team. So I feel honored and privileged to be able to work with teams and also to help families and parents, especially of their adult autistic folks, to understand that, hey, we've got to get a team on board here because we want your adult child to be successful. And talking to me once a week for 50 minutes, it's not enough. I've said this and I can't say it enough. Okay, first of all, people in recovery do great with structure, a schedule, and routine because we've got to change all the ways that you were functioning before, right? For autistic people, this is foundational. This is foundational. If I didn't know that I was getting on this call today with everybody at 10:30 and I didn't follow my schedule and routine this morning, I would have been late. I would have been tired. I may have made this social media buddy my best friend all morning. So I also, even though I might look put together, I have to have a schedule and routine to keep me going and functioning. Otherwise, guess what? Autistic people create their own structure and routines. And sometimes that could be 8 hours of viewing porn or 6 hours of video gaming or masturbating at their job because there's just not enough structure and they're flailing around. Okay. So important. All right, let me take a drink. I had the cold you have right now, Tammy, last week. So I'm with you. I'm sending you compassion. Okay, everybody. So what helps us? This is something I came up with after just seeing the things that I felt like we needed to tend to a little bit more in recovery. And so good sensory hygiene, I'm going to go through that next. We're going to talk about effective boundaries because all of us that are humans could do better with boundaries, but a lot of us who are autistic really struggle with boundaries. And so those are really important. And then also neuro-affirming communication and connection. What does that mean? What does that look like? All right, so I just want to acknowledge this slide looks very full. It's very full, but there were things, please take a picture of it, because there were things on here that I wanted to get across in terms of looking at what would it look like to explore good sensory hygiene. So if you're autistic in recovery, or you're a partner or a parent or you're a therapist, take a picture of this, because these questions you can ask yourself or who you're working with, okay? So Alex Katahakis is a big name in our field. She's a brilliant clinician. She has a program in Los Angeles, and she talks about sex addiction as affect dysregulation. And that applies to autistic adults because our emotional regulation is, our emotions are dysregulated, okay, quite often. And so we start helping those of us that are autistic and getting regulated by having good sensory hygiene. So let's define it. Good sensory hygiene in the most basic sense is feeling calm due to your environment being soothing. So you feel grounded, you feel calm, you feel regulated. It allows you to focus and function and concentrate because you feel calm, okay? So I want you to think about these questions, again, taking the picture of this slide. What and who in your life causes you stress? What helps decrease your stress? Okay, now for a lot of folks coming into sexual recovery, it's like, well, I've looked at porn before I go to bed and that helps me sleep, right? Okay, yeah, so it's like porn has become your sleep aid. So what if at night, if it's hard to sleep, we look at some different options, right? Yeah, like maybe for me, I play solitaire on my phone and I love it. Chris just showed me that and I was like, what? That is so relaxing to me. If I check my emails before bed, not going to sleep well. Okay. And so another thing, one of my clients that was in our sexual recovery program a while ago, autistic, said he would get up and do push-ups because that sense of feeling in his body wore him out and actually regulated his system enough and literally got him so tired that he would fall asleep. And if he woke up in the middle of the night, he would do it again. Now that might sound silly and wild and crazy, but whatever we can do. I have another sweet gentleman that I work with that is autistic, that he does a nightly call. It's a recovery-based call, and it always ends with one thing you're grateful for. And that, he says, is so awesome right before he goes to bed, okay? Now, I'm just talking about bedtime, but there's lots of ways that people feel stressed. So maybe your work schedule as an autistic person needs to look differently than 8 to 5, right? So looking at that, maybe when you get home, you need 30 minutes of downtime before you step into the role of parenting. Okay. So let's talk about PDA, persistent desire for autonomy. It's formally called pathological demand avoidance, but I feel like that literally physically makes me kind of sick to say. So I like to call it persistent desire for autonomy. And what that is really struggling with not feeling like you have any choices, or, okay, so, or that someone else is making those decisions for you. And so a lot of times folks that are autistic that have PDA say no, 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 a lot. And what needs to happen is to change that is, okay, couple choices, especially if you work with or you have autistic children. And you autistic children that have PDA, if you say, oh no, I know you'll love this. You'll love this. So I chose this outfit for you. Or we're going to do this today because I knew you would like it. So that if you have a child that's like, no, 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 they really need more choices than that. Okay, we've got 2 things you can eat. You know, you've got this option or this option. What do you want? Right. And as an adult, same thing. Okay. One example, a couple that I worked with gave was the autistic partner, anytime she would ask him to take out the garbage, hey, can you take out the garbage today? No, nope. Or sure, but then he wouldn't do it. So couple options there. Hey, I don't have time to take out the garbage. I'm wondering, could you do it this morning or tonight or maybe tomorrow morning? So some options, right? All right, so go through the list of senses for you. What are healthy ways to sensory soothe for you? And then you can work with the therapist on what are the ways I was sensory soothing that weren't so healthy, and what are some ways that I can soothe that are better than that are different from that. Okay. Are you on medication? And I only ask not because I'm a medication pusher, but because a lot of folks with autism struggle with anxiety and depression. A lot of ADHD folks do better with medication. Okay, so that might help you complete tasks, just feel better, especially if you're finding that you're spinning your wheels. What structure do you have in place every single day to help you in your recovery? Right? That's got to be put in place. What type of therapy are you doing and how often? Once a week would be amazing. Are you open to holistic options like cold plunges, breath work, or yoga? Because we know those actually help those of us that are autistic ADHD. So it's just some examples: exercise, working with a recovery team. Okay, boundaries. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I will say boundaries are so important. Please take a picture of this slide. Define what the word boundaries means to you in general. Define what it means to your partner if you're in a partnership. If you're an adult autistic person living at home, parents define what the boundaries mean, you define what boundaries mean, and then we're going to work together to try and get on the same page. Working with a therapist, your life coach, all on getting clear on what are your emotional boundaries. What about physical, sexual, religious? And in recovery, we're looking at those from a standpoint of like 3 circles, right? Defining consent, especially for those that move into unintentionally often illegal territory. What's consent? What's healthy versus unhealthy when we're talking about boundaries? How about with strangers? What about boundaries on your phone, on your screens, right? What about boundaries with your time? What about boundaries with work? Because a lot of times we'll see workaholism with problematic sex. Okay, and what can you be doing to add in some healthy sobriety behavior so there's a balance? Practicing emotional boundaries, we're highly sensitive. So oftentimes when I have an autistic person that comes in and says, hey, I was working with someone that told me I'm highly sensitive, or I read a book. Yeah, we talked about that. So how do you navigate that so that you know what's yours and what's others? And it's okay to start like checking in with that. Okay, is this mine? Is this my emotions? Or is this person who's crying in front of me and I'm demonstrating what's called effective empathy, which is I'm feeling the emotions of someone else and I'm feeling for them. And part of rejection sensitivity is really feeling another person and then worrying that it's about you. And so that reality checking that this isn't necessarily about me. But if it is, then you get to work through that together. Okay. So neuro-affirmative communication and connection. Thanks for hanging in there. Just a reminder, we communicate differently than verbal. And so sometimes when I have partners who I have so much compassion for, they've been betrayed, they're hurt, they're angry, they're like, you need to look at me when I'm talking to you, to their autistic partner. Can you accept that your autistic partner may not actually be able to focus, function, listen, or hear what you're saying if they're staring at you? But if they don't have their phone in front of them and they're listening and nodding and maybe looking up every once in a while and giving you some cue that they're there, can that be enough, right? Can that be okay? And couples get to decide truly what works for them together. Carolyn McGuire, her website is awesome. She created the 4 R's for navigating rejection. And I'm talking about it a lot because this is such a biggie in coupleships with adult autistic people and their parents, even in residential treatment centers or therapy, where it's like, oh, I feel like my therapist rejected me or the group members here rejected me. So recognize where you're at emotionally. Respond with an appropriate strategy. If you're in the red, you're probably going to either meltdown or shutdown. So maybe taking a break just to get yourself sensory soothed, go to a quiet place, get calm, and letting people know that I just need to take a time out. I just need to get grounded or regulated. Then looking at the facts. What are the facts of what happened? Oftentimes it's not a matter of rejection, it's just a conflict of needs. And what else could the facts mean, right? Does it have to mean that you're being rejected? This is a handout from the Minds Journal. And so I love internal family systems therapy. I created with Meg Martinez Dedamonte, a neuro-inclusive approach to internal family systems. And so really just our hardware is autism, our software are parts of us. And so this is the reality. Everyone doesn't secretly hate you, right? But parts of you may feel as though they do. So working in therapy on that, people, the people in your life won't be there is the opposite. They want to be there for you. So looking at some of those beliefs that cause you to feel rejected, and these are like the true statements, but when we show up, oftentimes it's the opposite of this. I have this handout if anyone wants it. There's a few handouts that I showed on here that I send people if you're interested. I can always send them to Tammy if there's a way to get them to everybody. But there are 4 types of empathy. Autistic people might express empathy in all 4 ways or a different way than their partner or their colleagues, their parents. Cognitive empathy is the way that the world says empathy is, which is I see your point. But a lot of autistic people express empathy through responsive empathy. How can I help you? Or somatic, they physically feel sick when the other person is upset or hurting, or they emotionally take it on, like I said, the emotional contagion of the other person. But often with somatic and affective, a lot of autistic people will freeze because they don't know what to do with that. And then it upsets their partner or their loved one because they're saying, why aren't you doing anything? And sometimes they just need a guide so that they know what to do. That's helped me as an autistic person with Chris, who he just says, it helps me when you do this. That script helps me help support him. We're almost there. Other tips that can help autistic adults in sexual recovery, scripts. And there's lots of books out there for autistic individuals, autistic or same mixed neurotype couples that have scripts, guides, try this, practice this. That really helps us. If you're going on a date and you're going to a restaurant and your autistic partner's never been, get online and look at it together. Check out the menu so that they see where they're going. That might decrease their anxiety. If it feels better to drive separately in case they're overwhelmed and they can't handle it, okay. If you two agree to that, great. There's lots of ways to get through life using scripts. This is just an example from our neurodiverse couples class that Chris and I teach. Here's a script for taking a break as a couple. Take a picture of this. So the person needing a break says, I love you. I'm committed to us. I'm taking a break for 30 minutes. I'll be back. And when you come back, you can apologize and start over. Gottman therapy, so Gottman.com has a great little booklet on the aftermath of a fight that's beautifully done as a script that I suggest all autistic people in relationships get. But that's a great script so that if you're autistic and you have a tendency just to withdraw and leave, the partner doesn't feel abandoned, right? EMDR therapy, eye movement desensitization reprocessing is one of several trauma therapies that's really beneficial. The research has shown for autistic folks. I love IFS, like I said. And then I have a free ebook, everybody. So Autism and Sensory Sex, if you're in a place in your sexual recovery where you're looking at healthy sexuality, how can you enjoy sexual pleasure by connecting to your sensory experience together as a couple? This would be a great ebook to get, okay? It's free. It's on my website. So that's it, everybody. You can follow me on Instagram. I just started that up again, or on Facebook. I'm trying to be better with social media, even though I'm not a fan. So thank you so much.
Well, and I did put in the chat because I can add to the chat. So I did put the website link so you can click on that if you're joining live. But otherwise, yes, hopefully people grabbed. And I have so many questions, but you have so many in the Q&A, so I'm going to get to those. If you want to stop sharing your screen so we can see you
Yep.
more, and click on Q&A. You'll be able to follow along. I'll read them.
Okay.
My 15-year-old son is on the spectrum, and as many his age, he is fully addicted to screens and also sneaks porn as often as he can. We put as many controls on as we can to keep him safe, but he's tech savvy and he still finds ways to access it. I just discovered ITAA for me and wondering if there are support groups for tech and porn addicted teens.
Gosh, sending you compassion. So I am not sure about I'm happy you connected to ITAP, and I'm not sure about the
Oh.
support groups, but what I will say is that, and I know for folks based on your religious beliefs, you may not agree with me, but sex education and talking about sex so they're not learning about sex through porn and online is important. So having the conversation like what with your child, finding a teenage therapist for your teenage son that could work with you and him around this would be really good, because when we're looking at exposure for teens, it's exposure. It really is. So it can be very, even if he feels anything like in his body physiologically to porn, it still can be very traumatic because what he's seeing, he's not ready to see. And porn isn't real, and it oftentimes can be very violent, and it can be very anti-women, right? I mean, it is anti-women. I won't go there, but that's all I'll say about that. So, so there definitely needs to be more than just putting controls on his phone. There needs to be conversations, therapy. There needs to be what helps him relax. You know, is there stress at school? Is he being bullied? Is his classroom too noisy? Does he need accommodations at school? Because my guess is that, you know, and I know this with teens, oftentimes they go into the school setting, he's autistic, he's different, who knows what's happening to him? The school setting is not geared to accommodate autism at all. And so stepping in more in that realm outside of just controls, or having him do a support group where you're more involved with him to figure out what's going on, talking to school, talking to the teacher. To me, that's the best way to respond in this situation.
I was thinking, yeah, a 15-year-old will always out tech any of us that are older. So, yeah. Okay. So the next question, how do you tell the difference between it being autism versus it being trauma? My partner thinks he's on the spectrum. My APSAT thinks it's trauma from his childhood. No official testing has been completed.
So the difference between, I'm a child sexual abuse survivor as an adult, and so I'll just say, as an autistic person, me walking into a social setting or being socially anxious in a social setting and trying to figure out where I step in to talk. Am I talking too much? Am I giving too much eye contact? Okay, I'm trying to understand the nuances. That's not trauma. That's not trauma. That's autism. The fact that I might stim, so do repetitive behavior to cope, that for me, like as I'm presenting, especially I have a stim toy, right? Focusing on that isn't because of my trauma. It's because I'm autistic. Now, can people, you know, sensory soothe that have trauma? Of course. And one of the diagnostic criteria for autism, among other things, is again, like socially, right? We just engage very differently. We have repetitive behaviors. Eye contact isn't our first way to communicate. So there's different things like that. Whereas my trauma will impact me in terms of like trusting someone, you know, whereas I might be a little more hesitant based on that. However, here's the challenge. My autistic system, I tend to be not pretty naive socially, I'll be honest, where I'm overly trusting. Now, someone can say that's trauma. Someone can say that's autism. It takes a skilled specialist to know what we're looking for with autism versus trauma. And I've screened people before where their therapist says, I think they're autistic. And I say, it's actually PTSD and OCD and other things. And I've screened a lot of people where, yeah, they have trauma over here. And this over here, when we're talking about communication challenges and executive function issues, et cetera, is autism. So hardware versus software.
And I want to go to not been, officially tested. And one more thing is, if it's your therapist who's not working, your spouse is not even that therapist's client, that's like the couple steps away. So, it's like Dr. Google, like there's information on there, but don't trust any of that. So if you want to know, like it would be so worth, we have people come to our residential program, and this was actually going to be one of my questions. So I was going to, when you found out, like to me, it would be like a relief of like, oh, this makes so much sense of all of these, like now I have, now I understand a little bit, and I can create a path forward. So to me, like with this, get tested, and from somebody qualified, and then, and then, you can deal with what you really have.
That's the key word, Tammy, is someone who's qualified, because even neuropsychologists, especially when we're looking at adults, miss the mark because just because someone's a neuropsychologist, a psychologist, a therapist, doesn't mean they're an expert in autism or a specialist, especially for those of us that have learned to mask our whole life. So we're adults, we mask. I know when I use my autism screening tool to screen someone, I know exactly what I'm looking for. I know how to ask the questions, what I'm asking. It can do quite a bit of damage for someone who's someone else's therapist saying, I don't think it's this, it's that, when they have no training or expertise in autism. So I agree with Tammy. Thanks.
Or even they're not working with that person, so
Yes,
so it's even a couple steps away.
Yeah.
The research I've read for many years notes hypersexuality in men as a common and predominant feature in autism spectrum disorder. Does this mean the deck is further stacked against these men once they've crossed into addiction? And they further add the deck is stacked against them for attempting recovery.
Yeah, I can see that. And so I've seen that research as well, where we're looking at hypersexuality in autistic men, and not every autistic man, but it is definitely more common. And for the reasons I explained, when it crosses over into the compulsivity or problematic behavior, if a lot of times what I'll see with autistic men when they have accurate treatment and they have a team of support and they have lots and lots of structure and they're willing and they're open, they want to change, they do change. They do get better, right? They do. But where I see people struggle is, and they flail around for quite some time going program to program, or they try different things, they don't have the accurate treatment in order to help them get better. So I don't feel like, I feel like anyone can heal, and that's what is needed for an autistic person who crosses over into addiction. That what I've talked about today is what someone needs in order to get better and heal.
And like you said, willingness, and that's true of any addict,
Yes.
whether you're neurodivergent or not, that ultimately that is key. Okay, thank you for doing this. My SA husband is ADD, BPD, and suffers from depression. He has been doing recovery work, but he is not sober. Is there hope for this relationship? We are separated due to his acting out. Should he be doing recovery differently? I feel hopeless. So first of all, betrayed partner, I'm before Candice, like take care of you. I'm sorry, that he's not getting the help that he needs yet. She'll talk to that, but please make sure you're taking care of you. There is safe space for you. We've got lots of, the moving on alone drop-in group is tomorrow. If you're separated, considering leaving, whatever, we've got lots of resources. Email me. I've got a bunch of things for you. Tammy, TAMI at seekingintegrity.com. Okay, you, Candice.
That's awesome. Thank you, Tammy, for that support. So there is hope. I can hear that you feel hopeless, and I have so much compassion for you for that. And what I would say is what I've talked about today is what's needed. That's what's needed, because he's not sober, right? He's been doing recovery work. I'm so curious what kind of recovery work, because again, if he's working with people that don't specialize in attention deficit, or it sounds like, is it bipolar or borderline, right? Which can be co-occurring, bipolar and borderline can be co-occurring with ADD and also autism, right? So if it's not an accurate treatment intervention, folks who are neurodifferent in these ways, they are going to struggle, because we do need a prescription, which I've described today. Thank you.
And this goes back to, is he willing to get help that would actually, and again, if he's struggling like that, and that's a very complex, mix of, things, we have a residential treatment program that has worked with these kind of clients and help with all aspects of that holistically. So Seeking Integrity Residential is expert. We'd be happy to help. Okay. My partner is a sex and porn addict and he has serious rage issues. It's abusive emotionally, verbally, and more. He is diagnosed ADHD, but not ASD. His rages are initiated by him being caught in a lie, my expressing his lies, my expressing my less than positive emotions to him, or his integrity is being questioned. I notice a big differentiation between this rage abuse and when he might be having a meltdown. When he has a meltdown, the trigger is external overstimulation or overwhelm, and he loses his words, freezes, and he can't make decisions. Can you please talk about the difference between abusive rage versus autistic meltdown, so that those of us in relationships with addicts who might be both on the spectrum and abusive can not be gaslit, us into thinking their lack of integrity and abuse is out of their control and solely related to autism? And can you also talk about, these are all part of the tapestry, but they're not excuses. We just have to find the right tools. It doesn't give us a pass. So please.
So you explained it, actually, whoever this person is, you explained it beautifully. When he has a meltdown, the trigger is external overstimulation, overwhelm, and he loses his words, freezes, and he can't make decisions because a meltdown is involuntary. Same with a shutdown. Our body will just do the reaction or shut it down, an involuntary measure to try and soothe. What we're talking about here, though, is rage, which is not okay, and abusive rage is not okay. It's still abuse. Someone who has a diagnosis of autism or ADHD, yes, can be emotionally dysregulated quite often, and it is no excuse to rage in the way we're seeing. In fact, lately, what we've seen, so much so that we're starting to treat this more, is the dark triad, which are oftentimes more traits than what we say traits of a person that looks narcissistic, having Machiavellian traits, which can be like conning behavior or just hurting somebody because it's fun or for sport, they find pleasure in it, and psychopathy. In psychopathy, there's no remorse. You care about yourself more than another person. When we think of a psychopath, that can be pretty scary. The reason I'm saying this is not to scare you. It's not to say your husband is that. What I'm saying is, when there's been a lot of, someone experiences trauma and they're autistic, they feel lonely, isolated, they're different in a world that operates a certain way, they're emotionally dysregulated from ADHD or ADD, for instance. If he's bipolar, no, he's not, this is a different one, but so there's that going on. There can also be parts within a person that are very angry and that can be rageful and punishing to the partner, and it is still abusive. And whether they're aware that they're doing that or not, because they're being reactive in their abusive rage, it still is that. So there has to be an intervention around that. And one thing, and again, he has to be willing to get help for this, but if there is rage at that level, you setting some boundaries, getting support so that you're safe, making sure it's you're safe, your kids, if you have kids, are safe, having boundaries. Maybe you have a bottom line behavior. And then if he's willing, getting on some medication is going to be important, because with that type of rage, and again, I'm not a med pusher, but sometimes neurologically, when someone is raging at that level, again, it's destroying everything. It's destroying you, your relationship. It's not okay, and it is abuse. So it's not an excuse.
I know we're almost out of time. We can go a little bit over, but I want to honor your boundaries. Do you have a little extra time?
I have a little, yeah.
Okay, so we'll go until you can't. Okay. My SAPA partner cannot stand the word no. For example, when he asked to shuffle all responsibility of a project to me, I said, no, X is your responsibility and Y is my responsibility. Even though the Y I mentioned I do was exactly what he wanted to make sure I do, he was annoyed that I started off with a negative. Is this rejection sensitivity, or is this an addict not liking hearing the word no? I'm trying to get better at boundaries and saying no, and rejecting his tactics is part of my work.
So this is where it's hard to hear a little snapshot. If I were talking to you and your partner, I would be able to know exactly what to say in response. And that's kind of the same with all of these, where I'm going to do my best, but it is hard on a snapshot. So it sounds like it could be rejection sensitivity, sure, right? I would want to get more information from him, from you, with the dynamics. Okay, when he says this or when you say this, what happens, right? So it could be that, and it could also be totally manipulative. It could be his way, because that's been the dynamic in your relationship, right? He doesn't, like you said, he can't stand the word no, or he doesn't tolerate it. If he is autistic and he struggles with that, or perhaps he's PDA, I see SAPA. So if he is PDA, I mean, he's struggling with you saying no. He's not struggling to say no. So to me, there's something going on there where, yeah, it could be rejection sensitive. And it also could be a control tactic. That one's tricky. I'm sorry that I can't be clear on my answer. I need more information on that.
Yeah, well, and I was thinking, I wonder if you start out with, thank you for asking me. I'm going to hold to what I agreed to do previously. So you're not like, if you take the word no out of it, that the message is still no. But if you just take the word no out of your response, I would, maybe play with that and see if that change. I don't know if it will, but he's clearly reacting to that right now. Okay, can you speak to the experience and recovery of an autistic betrayed partner? I feel like our strong sense of justice and more sensitive emotional states makes recovery and any reconciliation far more difficult.
So it can and it does, for sure. When I think about the autistic betrayed partners that we work with, one of the things that I would say is I love IFS for this reason, looking at the parts of you that jump in when you get that sense of justice, and then really working on your system. Like, what do you need to be sensory soothed, to be emotionally soothed and regulated? Because we can get in a space where it's like, no, you did this, so I'm holding to that for that very reason. So I think in our own therapy, if we're able to really understand our autistic traits as partners, especially, and then also, okay, what extra support do I need so that I'm able to perhaps give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's say if he's demonstrated sobriety, and not wash over our life with this anger because of this, that will help. Again, if I could talk to you in person, it would be so much easier for me to explain. But I do think, especially for autistic females, because we are very emotional, very passionate, we can really get locked and loaded. Autistic men can as well, but when there's been a betrayal, we can get very locked and loaded. And a lot of times, there's a lot of reasons for that, but the book Divergent Mind by Janara Narenberg is one that has helped me tremendously in understanding my own autism as a female. And then I think would be really helpful for you as a betrayed partner, because she talks so much about what's needed in our systems to feel soothed. That's a big part of it, is you're not feeling safe or soothed by your partner.
Well, the next question is from another betrayed partner on the spectrum. So what are the typical issues you see come up for the betrayed partners who are on the spectrum? I think my neurodivergence ability to research turned into safety-seeking behaviors into an FBI-like level work.
Yeah.
But where it feels hardest is when I'm really good at understanding how and why my husband struggles with addiction, but really hard for myself when I feel any intolerance I feel coming up towards him or in the past behaviors, especially around things I feel like are deal breakers for me. I'm still trying to make it work.
Mhm. So let me just read that part. But let's see, where it feels hardest is that I'm really good at understanding how and why my husband struggles with addiction, which we are. I also think we can have parts that kind of have dreamer parts that want to believe that they're getting better sometimes, and so can get really frustrated with ourselves because we're not living, quote, in reality necessarily. You said, but really hard with myself when I feel any intolerance I feel coming up toward him. So again, how can you be more gentle with yourself? Because I will say autistic individuals are probably the hardest critics on ourselves than anyone else. And that's, again, because we grow up in a world feeling very different. So if there's a way to start working more on self-compassion for you, also learning better boundaries if you feel like you're struggling with that. And working with a therapist that kind of can really help you get some clarity around what do you want in a relationship? What do you feel like you deserve? What do you deserve? And maybe where are some ways that you drop your boundaries or abandon yourself for other people? Because a lot of autistic people, females especially, will abandon ourselves for our relationships. So strengthening your self-worth, your self-esteem, and your boundaries can be really, really important.
So speaking of that, we have a boundaries work group for betrayed partners starting in April. Debbie McCrae does a great job of internal boundaries, owning that I need to take care of me, and then the external boundaries. But I think you were also talking about, like, you go to you like to lift weights. So you have found things that help you regulate, you talked about cold plunges.
Yes.
So those terrify me, but yeah, like finding the things that will help regulate. And we talk about that often for partners. So it feels like that's extra important for a betrayed partner who may be neurodivergent, to help regulate.
No, thank you for saying that, because I think about the partners that stopped because they have been doing the FBI, as you said, the FBI level research. So their life, instead of their own structure and routines, gets focused on that. And so can you get back to some of your own structure and routines that help you feel good? Thanks, Tammy.
Okay. Next one is my partner is a sex and porn addict. As far as I know, he has an official ADHD diagnosis in adulthood, and he took medication for a couple of years. He self-identifies as autistic. During his divorce to his first wife, he pursued and didn't follow through on getting an assessment and diagnosis for autism to prove that his ex-wife was an abusive narcissist, and there was a reason for his behaviors and anger towards her that she deemed problematic. I want my partner to get the support he needs if he's autistic. How do I make sure it's not weaponized though? P.S. I'm the betrayed partner. No, I, as a betrayed partner, have ADHD, and my therapist suspects autism as well.
Okay. So what I'll say is, a lot of times what we're seeing is that by the time someone steps into autism specialist office to be diagnosed, they've rabbit holed, because that's one of our traits, is really researching and rabbit holing. Here's a difference between trauma and autism, ADHD. For folks is, we'll rabbit hole things, we hyper focus, we really want to like study and learn things. And so we know more about ourselves a lot of times than the person in front of us that's doing the screen, okay, or the screening. So I can hear that. I agree with the language you're using, though, that it's weaponizing, right? It's like this, he pursued a diagnosis, or he wants, for autism, he wants to prove that his ex-wife. So that to me needs to be addressed in therapy. And the way I would approach it would be through an internal system, family systems model of really witnessing the part of him that feels like his ex-wife was abusive to him. And it's like, a lot of times what can happen for autistic people is we have been really misunderstood. We do actually get gaslit from the world. So here's the thing that feels really crazy making for the betrayed partner of an autistic person who has been gaslit by the world, because we do it differently, is then if they do it, then it's like, oh my God, I feel like we're in this chaos, right? So it's like, I just want to validate what you're saying, that he's pursuing a diagnosis because he wants to prove his abusive ex-wife, like it's the reason for his behavior. The reality is his behavior, not his ex-wife's. So he needs accurate therapy with someone that can hold him accountable to, look, your betrayal was your choice. This is not because of someone else. Now, I will say, kindly, gently, there are some autistic people that push back at being confronted with that. They can be locked and loaded, very black and white, in thinking that, no, I did this because my partner, my ex-wife, and I can hear that. And so in therapy, we could look at that, but he also has to get to a place where he can be accountable that he still chose his problematic behavior, because he is weaponizing it at this point. To blame someone else is actually a thinking error. That's not healthy, regardless of your neurotype.
Well, and I was saying, you can't make sure it's not weaponized. You have zero control over him. Just like Candice was saying, we are responsible for our behaviors, and so you taking care of you doing what you need to do. You've got some diagnosis of your own, so you finding the ways to regulate and take care of you, regardless of what he's doing, and healthy boundaries. I'm going to say it again, in early April. I think it's April 2nd. The boundaries work group will start. I highly encourage it. It's going to be so good. I've been advocating for that one I think since last summer. So it's finally coming to fruition. So you still good with time, or like
Yeah, well, let's do maybe one more.
okay. My PA therapist, after 1 hour, determined PA is OCD. The only thing he's ever done with regularity is porn and masturbation. He has no hobbies, no interests, no friends, doesn't care if things are helter-skelter at work or at home. He has no particular interest in household cleanliness or child rearing, but did regularly watch porn and masturbate. Really? Is this OCD?
Yeah, so I can't diagnose whether it's OCD or not, but I will say what causes me pause is no interest in cleanliness, child rearing, no hobbies, no friends. So when we're looking at obsessive compulsion, clients of mine that are autistic are struggling with what you're describing, the household, no friends, no interests. Literally that, the OCD would be more like intrusive thoughts all day long, repetitive behaviors. There's like obsessive thoughts, right? Compulsive behavior around something. But so what I'm hearing is, I mean, it sounds like a misdiagnosis, but again, I'd have to talk to you and your partner to know better. This is kind of this, I guess I say this kindly, but this is where we need specialists to not like one off, not, oh, you know, or someone that doesn't know what they're looking for to say it's this. Perhaps that his therapist needs to have him screened by someone who could delineate between, is it autism? Is it OCD? Because it sounds like whoever wrote that, you're questioning it too. And I think it's valid that you're questioning it because it doesn't sound to me like OCD.
Dr. Rob just talked about this on the webinar on Monday night. So I would encourage you to go back and look at that one. It's on our website. But yeah, OCD is like, yeah, I'm counting counting the ceiling tiles. I'm doing all those things that aren't fun. And of course, compulsive behavior with sexual behavior is, that's a whole different thing. There's a quick little screen on our homepage of Seeking Integrity that is, could be helpful. We have a porn addiction 101, online work group starting again soon. But if you're like, I question if your person went to a CSAT trained therapist, because a generalist therapist, is not trained in these issues to really suss out. Yeah, there's a lot there, and we won't go there. So, but yeah, thank you so much, Candice. This was so helpful, and then we've got so many more questions. Hopefully we can do this again, and have you come back and do more of a part 2 Q&A or something like that. So I'll be in touch. But I'm really grateful for your time today. The recording will be posted on the website today. No, Scott's gone. It won't be posted today. It'll be posted this week. So anyway, so thank you all. Thanks for showing up. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.